two organisations which you probably know of, Birds Australia, which had been going since 1901, and BOPA since 1905, so together about 100 years of great birding, both in conservation and research. And these two organisations kind of did one thing or the other, so the idea was to pull those resources together and make a combined entity that did both things really well, hopefully really well. So within the Birds Australia, there are lots of different projects going on, local ones and national ones, things like Shorebirds 2020, really focus things like Regent Honeyeater stuff. What the Powafilao project is kind of a project that falls between two different arms of management within the group. So the Threatened Bird Network is one of those, because we're dealing with a species that's one of our rare and threatened. Powafilao are vulnerable throughout their range, all the places that they occur, and actually they're about to be upgraded to endangered in South Australia. So the Threatened Bird Network really focuses on trying to help conserve birds directly, so it's an opportunity for people to become involved and to be able to do something concrete for the birds that they see that are in trouble in their area. And the other thing is the Birds in Backyards project. Whoops, wrong button. That one. So the Birds in Backyards project involves Powafilao because we're really interested in what's happening with Powafilao in urban situations. We know quite a lot about what's going on with Powafilao in the forest, but not so much about what's happening in the city. So really the focus of this project has been what's the status of urban Powafilao and what can we do about them where they occur. So just a little bit of history about the project, I guess. The project was firstly a grassroots citizen science project. It wasn't scientists that, speaking of which, my phone's probably on, but I hope it won't ring. It was a project that was thought of by this lady, Kristen Hardy, in 2011. So she wasn't a scientist, she was just a layperson, and was really interested in understanding the status of Powafilao. So she had owls fledging into her backyard and really didn't know much about what was happening to them, and in the process of trying to find out that, realised that no one really knew what was happening with them. So she got together with Rod Kavanagh, who's one of our eminent nocturnal and mammal experts who's been working with Powafilao, has been working with them for about 35 years now, and together the two of them came up with the idea of establishing a citizen science project where we asked members of the community to come on board and help us research what's going on with the owls. That was 2011. We got a bit of funding, and BirdLife Australia took the project over in 2012, and the first project officer, it's David Bain, came on board, and he worked for 2 years on the project, and that was funded through an Environment Trust grant. The money ran out in 2014, and then it kind of ran along on a shoestring for a year or so, and in the last 6 months we've received another round of Environment Trust funding, which has employed me, and I'm 18 months of running around chasing owls in the forest, which is what I do at the moment, so I'm about 6 months into that. And very excited because we're just at the beginning of the first breeding season, my first opportunity to see chicks poking out of hollows, which is just so good. Can't wait, and we're only a few months away from that as well. So I wanted to say firstly that as a citizen science project, these are the people that require our thanks. It's not scientists who sit. I feel like I just sit around going, oh, candy floss, all the sweet stuff, and I get all the information and I compile it and I send it out to land managers, and we, affect conservation change that way. But really the grunt work of the project is the volunteers, who are just lay people who really like birds, and some of them, once they get the owl bug, are quite obsessed about owls. So we have managers who manage different parts of the region for us. It used to be Chris Lloyd down in the southern part, Georges River. You might have heard him talk about seabirds. He's working on 5 islands at the moment. He likes petrels. He has been quite involved with the Powafilao project, but has decided to pursue his petrels a bit more now. So the Georges River territories are open. If anyone comes from that way and they feel like they want to watch owls, please come on board. Otherwise it'll be me running around the forest. So Chris Lloyd has been managing the south, as I said, and he did great work in educating lots of community talks to talk about owls and raise the presence of owls too, which has been fantastic. Jackie Marlowe has been working through the Northern Beaches. We have a really high density of owls up in the Northern Beaches, so she's been doing great work up there and managing that population of owls. And in fact, I had a look at it the other day and realised that trees within 13 kilometres up on the Northern Beaches, which is unprecedented for a threatened species. A really incredible density of owls up there. And Alan Morris does you may know of him, he's from the Central Coast Birders, and he manages the Wyong Central Coast area. So there are owls in Newcastle as well, but Hunter Bird Observers take records but aren't really involved directly with the project. So I'm really Newcastle to get involved so we can compile that information. And of course, we don't want to sit on it, we want to send it directly back out to the land managers as quickly as we can so that we can actually do real things in conserving the habitat for the birds. The idea is not to just sit there and go, fantastic, I know everything about owls, but actually to make that mean something real in the world. So, really what the project aims to do is two different things. A sciencey bit, which is about ecology, and then an outreach bit, which is about teaching people about owls. So, the science bit is really looking at breeding success, diet, habitat characters, mortality and injury, which I think is really interesting. So at the moment I'm looking at mapping where all those sorts of deaths occur and looking at putting interpretive signage in through the councils to actually advise people that owls are there. Hasn't been very successful so far, but I've just begun and it's a big fight. I'm sure I'll get there by the end of my tenure in this job. The second part is really to engage the community in conservation of owls. That means telling people why owls are really important, why they're so fantastic, you know, and what we can do to actually help them stay where we would like them to stay. We do that by, of course, educating, by training and by involving the community in whichever capacity they feel like they want to be involved. So if someone says, I think I want to do this, then I make a space for them to do that. Part of my job is to make sure that people can do what they want to and that it helps all of us move forward. So who are the powerful owls? That was the business end, and here's the good bit. This is more interesting. Who are the powerful owls? This is one of our birds from Melbourne, but most of the birds, I actually would show you some local birds, but we don't have photos, so we have to go and get them. Hopefully if I come back and talk to you again this time next year, we'll have a fantastic slideshow of our own owls from the air, which would be great. You know most of the owls in Australia are all birders. I'm probably telling you how to suck eggs here, but in case you don't know, we have about 9 species of owls, 10 but 9 on the mainland, and 8 if you don't count the sooty owl as being split into greater and lesser sooties. Of the ones that we actually have in our area here, of course, we have powerful owl whoops up here, masked owl, barn owls, which are common throughout Australia, barking owls down here, this is sooties, and all of these 3 that are in the red circles are the ones that are declining quite rapidly, and we don't actually have an explanation of why it is that they're declining. Hopefully you'll be able to hear the audio. Sometimes it's been very tricky, but I wanted you to actually hear the difference between powerful owl and boobook owl, because that's our other common owl that we have in the area. I'm sure that most of you already know what they sound like, but it's a beautiful sound. Up in my part of the world at Bulli, they call from the creek, and I can hear 4 birds calling at one time, literally duetting, harmonising. They're amazing, and even within a span of about 50 to 100 metres, it's incredible. I've never heard the boobook so noisy yet. See, it says codec unavailable. So anyway, I may not be able to show you that. Yeah, I had to play it off the app on the weekend in Thirroul anyway, but it doesn't matter, you know what they sound like, and we can play it off the app if you like afterwards. That's powerful owl. Yes, that's a terrible recording. I'll have to send them better ones. But anyway, so you know that boobooks look quite different. We're talking about a wingspan of boobooks in yay big and yay high versus powerful owls standing at 65 centimetres and about 140 wingspan. So a remarkably different category of predator, in fact an apex predator. So there's nothing nocturnal up in the skies eating anything bigger than powerful owl. That's at the top. And of course, most of our apex predators from all of our environments are declining, and it's only, you know, through work that we can try to keep them there. We know that the polar bears are going, that our big carnivorous dolphins are going, and of course powerful owl are going at the top as well. We just run out of space for these animals. This is a juvenile powerful owl. They change plumage as they grow. They start off as fluffy white chicks, and then their coloration comes in, and we get this V-shaped chevron in the front, which is the distinctive plumage character of powerful owl. And the other thing that you notice about them are these huge, long raptorial talons, very obvious when you're seeing it holding onto a piece of prey, which we'll show lots of photos of in a second, because that prey caching is also really typical of powerful owl. The reason they're called Ninox strenua, strenua for strength, is that they have, I fantastic. Mrs. Powerful, I think we heard Mr. He was on the app before. There's Mr. Powerful, and here are the chicks. I wanted to show you the chicks because these chicks are quite a distinctive character of ours. You may not hear them particularly often, and sometimes when you hear them in the bush, you don't actually know what they are. So quite different to the adults. And in fact, sometimes they're so cryptic that we don't know that Powerful are there at all until you start hearing that really distinctive chick call, which will start in August when they fledge. And then you will know that they're about, which is a great thing. So this is one of the most interesting things about Powerful Owl, and one of the reasons they're so aptly named. We're talking about your pounds of pressure per square inch when you squeeze your fist together like that at about 20 ppsi. Powerful Owl grip is 200 times stronger than as strong as you can grip. So it's actually within the top 4 strongest birds, and it's our biggest, the only bird we have in Australia that lifts more than its own body weight in prey. And so in fact is a really, you can see why it's at the top of the food chain. Incredibly strong and deft, and a very good hunter as well. We call Powerful Owls an umbrella species in the science world. We call them all sorts of things. We call them a flagship species because they're so charismatic and everyone wants to suddenly conserve them, and because they're great, everything else that lives with them are great. But I think more interesting is to think of them as an umbrella species, which means that if we conserve the whole area in which Powerful Owls live, we're also conserving all of the rest of the things that have to live within that area, which include the plants and the animals that are in the area. So in terms of, and that territory size will vary really greatly depending on how much food is available. We know that out in the rangelands where you need a lot more trees to develop enough possum for Powerful Owl, that can be 1,000 hectares. Whereas in the really dense leafy parts of the Lane Cove where Powerful Owl love to be, it might only be 20 hectares. So it really depends on what food sources are around as to how that influences the size of the territory. And I guess really interestingly, we're finding that territories in the urban environments are incredibly small compared to the forests. And you need to really ask the question of why is it that there are so many possums, really. It's not about why there are so many owls, but why have we got so many possums? There's obviously just no predator that's able to control possum populations. All we're seeing a possum population increase at the moment. Possum populations fluctuate. All animal populations fluctuate, they go up and they down. It may be that what we're seeing is the possums going up, and so the Powerful Owls tend to be going up as well in response to the possums, and whether that will stay or not, we just don't know. It's just a matter of trying to find more data and finding ways to keep owls in the environment. So, as I said, Powerful Owls are currently vulnerable throughout their range. They go from Mackay Rocky all the way down to the border of South Australia. We're in this little hotspot where all the red dots join up together. This map's kind of old. If we were to actually map the distribution of owls now, we'd see, yes, this coastal band still exists, but in fact, this patch of owls that are out in the rangelands behind the Great Dividing Range are actually almost gone now, and part of that is to do with habitat destruction, which is happening out there. When we look at what our habitat looks like, we think that this looks quite typical of what we have here in the Illawarra. Lovely wet sclerophyll forest with a nice tree canopy, lots of ferns and a good understory. It looks like pristine forest. Owls must live there because they're forest birds. In fact, they don't. they live in the cities in areas much like that. They live on the clothesline. I had a report yesterday of a lady who couldn't get into her house in Austinmere because the owl was on the fence and it was too scary to walk past it to actually go to the front door. So they actually are very obvious in the urban environments because they're moving out of these green patches, which is where they live, to forage in the very urbanised parts of the town, and then they come into contact with people through on their letterboxes. That happens quite often. They seem to like letterboxes. It's a great place to sit, but also on verandas and clotheslines and everything else as well. So that might be where we're more likely to see Powerful Owl unless we want to actually go and look for them. Powerful Owl are obligate hollow users. It means they have to have tree hollows to breed. No tree hollows, no owls. So we have to have large trees like this one, and that tree is usually a diameter of at least 70 to 80 centimetres, probably longer, and we know that time it takes to form a tree hollow for a big tree is somewhere over 100 years, between 90 and 150 years to actually get big enough to form a hollow for owls. And sadly, in urban environments, they're the ones that we cut down rapidly because there's deadly widowmakers and they're going to kill us all with their big holes. And so they're the ones we're losing at a great rate, and they're actually the ones that are really important for lots of animals, not just parafalao. But if we look at where parafalaos, whoops, wrong button, are roosting, this environment is actually far more typical of where parafalao are. It's not the big trees with the large tree canopies and then some regrowth beside it. It tends to be these dense, leafy, enclosed places where we'll find parafalao, and in fact they're often very much across the top of the creek lines and in the gullies. Very rare that you would actually see parafalao roosting in the day outside of the gully systems. They're just about always in the gullies, and they're often very low in the gullies in the hot weather, even right down to the ground level as well. So in the summertime, if you're tromping up the creek, please be careful. Remember, as I foolishly didn't, when I was walking along going, I bet there's parafalao here. I can just, you know, you can just feel that there's going to be an owl. And then I bent down to go, oh, a parafalao feather. And then I stood up. Stupidly, Mum and Chick were right there at eye level. And I flushed them about 10 metres, which is not what you want to do. So you have to actually really be quite cautious in the hotter parts of the years and be aware of where you are, because they're very cryptic. Sometimes you can walk right past them 2 metres away and you won't notice until you come back up the creek line and have another look from a different angle, and you'll see that they're there. So, and I must say, Joy and Nerida had a lovely time walking through this with me on the weekend. We were a frolicsome bunch, I must say. We played lots of games like Twist Your Ankle and Do the Log Limbo, but we survived it. And actually I've found another 3 creeks just in the last couple of days from the sightings records coming in from the public that give me some really good ideas about where we should go looking next, because as I said, we're still on the hunt for parafalao here. Okay, so as I said, 90 to 150 years for that hollow to get big enough. And there are about 8 different species of trees that actually support hollows. The rest of the trees never actually grow big enough to develop a hollow, which means that hollows, of course, are one of the things that we need to champion when we're thinking about what it is we want to keep in the environment, to keep parafalao there. These chicks are from Menai. This is actually an illegal photo. Flash photography is an absolute no-no for parafalao, but when you're dealing with a project full of volunteers, people will generally do what they want to do. But it's something that we really try to discourage, because we don't actually know what the effects of flash are for nocturnal birds. We know that it causes night blindness for 20 minutes. So if you're repeatedly flashing an adult, you're actually reducing its foraging time over a period of the night. It's very hard to make that argument if someone wants a good photo, but I'm trying. So hopefully we can play this video, because I'd like you to see some of the behaviours in action which are really good. Usually I would click. No, our system does not like it. So if we come back, and I'll see if I can play it from the mouse for you. Well, it's actually the video without the flash, because there's a whole heap of... Quick time not available. Evil. Well, that would have been a lovely video for you, because you'd have seen them duetting and feeding each other and re-establishing all of their beautiful pair bonds, which is what they're up to at the moment. So we're in the we're getting into the good part of the breeding season, where all the flirting and all the sexy behaviours going on at the moment. Lots of Mr. Parafalao feeding Mrs. Parafalao, and he does that a lot to re-cement the bonds. So we're not talking about a bird that migrates or moves out of its territory. They're always within the same territory. They just use different bits of it depending on what's going on in the breeding cycle. So when we're coming into the core part of the breeding season, they're incredibly vulnerable to being disturbed. So we have to be quite careful about what we do in there. But they'll be sitting right in the core part of the territory, which is usually around where those big tree hollows are, if they have one. And doing all of that lovely rebonding, re-cementing the pair bonds, which involves a lot of stropping of beaks and cuddling up. So they sit together a lot. They feed, Mr. Parafalao feeds Mrs. Parafalao. It's a possum, which is highly romantic. And yeah, a lot of duetting and calling. So that's what we'll hear when we're thinking about where Parafalao are in the Wollongong. It's those callings that we really want to be listening for, because we'll hear him calling and we'll hear Mrs. Parafalao responding, hopefully. And if we can hear those two, that's a winner for knowing where it is to go and look.
Where can we find that video? Is it on
I can give it to you.
Can you?
Yeah.
It's actually on that PowerPoint presentation, is it?
Yes,
Can we
it
get
is.
a copy of that, and I can put it
For
on
sure.
the web?
For sure.
I can click on.
Yeah, and there's actually another video which has some parts of it in. That's if you search for Powerflower bird life, a YouTube video will come up which will show you quite a few of the behaviours as well. You have David talking and telling you poetry at the same time. You may like it. Anyway, on we go. No, wrong thing. Yes. So, in terms of Powerflower and the problem with hollows in the environment, I just wanted to say that there's a major war going on between Powerflower, particularly Powerflower and cockatoo, for these hollows because they are prime real estate, because they are so scarce in the environment, and because everybody wants to use them. So we're finding that there's been a lot of predation from cockatoos growing into the nest holes and pulling fledglings out and killing them. Powerflower actually eat cockatoos at the right part of the season, so you would think that Mr. Powerflower would actually defend his hollow, but in fact in the daytime he doesn't do that at all. He hasn't got the cues for behaviour to actually chase the cockatoos away unless it's dark, which is when Powerflowers want to be active, and then he might get a bit stroppy. So, and also I think that depends too on the birds. They're quite different. They're like humans, you know. Every pair of birds has got a real personality, and some of them are mellow and, you know, will accept people walking underneath while they go along the tracks, and other ones are so stroppy, particularly the young males when they first start breeding, and they're so defensive of, you know, my offspring that I'm making, that they'll actually be quite aggressive and strike people as well as dogs and cats and whatever else goes underneath. So these hollows are in prime demand at the moment. The cockatoos are actually scouting them out, and they'll go into the hollow while the owlets are in there, and as I said, sometimes they do pull them out and kill them. And even if the owls manage to retain that hollow and produce chicks, we find that cockatoos are really in that hollow, usually within a day, half a day to a day of the owls vacating. The cockatoos are in there and using it for their own purposes, so really important. And the other thing that happens is that the cockatoos take over the hollows and might use them for a year while they breed, and out they get, and then the owls can get another chance to get back in. But these European honeybees are another huge problem for Powerflower because they're taking the hollows as well. And bee populations, despite the fact that we hear that bees are going and all the bees are dying in the world, in fact European bees are getting up and great numbers. And we're finding that they take over the owl hollows. They love the big hollows that the owls love, and they might stay in residence for 5 or 6 years. And obviously, in many of the territories, there's just not enough big hollows to replace the one that the owls would like to use. Although, in a territory that owls think is great, they would love to have 2 or 3 choices of hollow, even though they've got a favourite one that they keep coming back to. But in fact, the bees are taking over all the good ones, and they're left with the scraps, or in fact, we just can't breed, which we're finding is happening in quite a few of the territories. When we think about who it is that needs a hollow, it's obviously not just Powerflower, but all of the other things that actually use hollows as well. So nearly half of all of our mammals in Australia have to use hollows. 70% of all of our birds, which include our rare and threatened things like orange-cheeked parrot, and nearly 30% of all of our reptile fauna have to use hollows as well. So hollows are a really important factor, and we call it a critical limiting factor in ecology, and it's something we know very little about. It's something that we really need to know more about, and something that we should focus on understanding more about. And if anyone's really interested in hollows and how useful they are and how they work as opposed to man-made structures like nest boxes, I would really encourage you to go and look at the Botanic Gardens Hollows as Homes project. It's a fantastic study that's just started, another citizen science one that asks you guys to report in what you see using tree hollows, what you see using your nest boxes in your backyard, so we can really understand the dynamics of those spaces and try to make them a better place for our fauna. So of course, deforestation is a massive problem for an animal that needs trees, but more than deforestation, habitat fragmentation is a really big problem for our, particularly out in those wooded rangelands where they're disappearing. Fragmentation isn't necessarily a problem when you can fly far, as you can when you're a Powerflower, but it's certainly a problem when you eat possums, because possums have to have connected habitat to actually breed and move and increase their population size. And in fact, every time you see habitat fragmentation, it's all those arboreal mammals that will drop out first. Other threats for Powerflower include wildfire, which is a big thing out in the rangelands, but in the urban environment, in fact, this situation is really, really common for Powerflower because the young ones, this is the young bird, you can see it's white bib. Young ones often don't really know how to hunt or how to carry large prey as well as they might. They get better at it as time goes by, but in the beginning sometimes they don't, and so they actually drag their prey rather than flying around the treetops with it. And they're down on the road like this, and here there's a big flash of headlights in the eyeballs, and this is night blindness, and you've probably seen birds at night. You can get a good photo of them. They love to sit there because they don't want to move because they can't see. And same for the parfalao, and people just don't stop, and so parfalao get mowed down, and they fly into the side of the cars fairly regularly too. And we suspect that, from what we know of what we've seen so far, which is obviously an underrepresentation of real numbers, we're losing about 10% of the urban population every year just through car strike, and about 2% through entanglement, which is power lines, and there's some secondary poisoning that happens through rat baiting as well for some of the owls in North Sydney particularly. But on a more cheerful note, these are our closest known new family of parfalaos. So these are Bundinas bulbs. They're the new chicks that turned up last season. So we know that parfalao have been breeding in Bundeena, and as they have everywhere, we're finding that people used to report them and they knew they were there and they heard them previously, and now they disappeared for 5 or 10 or 7 years, and suddenly people are saying, I hear ours again. In fact, even lay people who don't know much about ours say to me down at the school pickup, oh, it's a bad year for owls, isn't it? And I go, well, no, it's a great year because owls are back in town. And that's really why we need to get out and talk to the community and educate them and let them know what it is they're hearing, and why it's important that they're hearing it too. So our two bulbs, and of course 2 is the biggest chick size for clutch for parfalao. And when we actually apply the numbers of mortality, I'm pretty kind about it and think about mortality in a lower sense than it really is. It's usually about 80% for birds in the first year, and then if you multiply that out to breeding age for the adults, you actually end up with somewhere around 125 birds recruiting into the breeding population in the whole of New South Wales per year. And that doesn't include anything that we will lose through car strike or entanglement or anything else. So you can see why it is there on the decline. And it takes about 10 years for them to actually get big enough to breed. So it's a long process for parfalao. But this is what we know about them. And I would have told you 3 weeks ago that these were set in stone. These were the dates where they did this and they did that. And it wouldn't matter if we were looking at ours in the forest or we were looking at ours in the urban environments, that everything was the same for parfalao. But in fact, I'd be telling you a lie, because this year things seem to be really, really different for parfalao. Before, March and April was the time where we would have lots of this rebonding, matings, callings, choosing a hollow to breed in, all of the rest of it. By late May, it gets a bit quieter. Mum goes down into the hollow and incubates that egg, which takes about a month. Mr. Parfalao will be sitting guard somewhere fairly close by, usually within 10 metres of the tree hollow. And she'll sit on the egg, and then she'll sit with the chicks for a further month after that. And then in August, up come the babies. Usually they fledge out of the hollow and don't go back in, so there's only one event where they go. Often, for some it might take 2 or 3 days, but it won't take more than a week. They really, once they're out of the hollow, that's the end of it. They're out of there, and they generally try to move away from that environment. In fact, if you were near a known owl tree and you were out fledging, you'd know about it because they smell pretty stinky. It's a month of sitting down in your own feces and bits of possum in there, and it makes a pretty nice miasma. So Mum does actually come out in periods from the incubating to actually have a wash, which is why you often find them associated with pools in the creek front as well. So in August, up come the babies. There they are, 2 lovely little fluffy jobs, and we would say that by March they're gone and the next round of breeding season is ready to start. But in fact, it's a damn lie, because there are still chicks calling, begging and being fed by their parents right now in territories. So that might just be the lazy teen syndrome. I think my children will probably do the same thing to me in a few years. But certainly this pattern seems to be changing. We had matings and swoopings and the choosing of the hollow happening a month earlier, and we've still got chicks hanging around for a lot longer than we did have. Whether that pattern's going to continue, I don't know. We really need to see what goes on this season and see whether it's changing, and it's really concrete. It'd be great to know, so it's just a matter of collecting more data. If we look at how many owls tried to breed versus how many chicks they actually managed to get out, it was fairly consistent for the first 5 or so years. About 50% of those that tried to breed actually made a chick, but then the season that's just finished, actually significantly higher, so that's about 81%. So whether that continues, I don't know. Need more data, hoping that it will be greater. And this is what the mapping looks like for Paupalau. So the biggest part of the project range is in the Sydney Basin. The yellow squares are territories that actually managed to produce a chick. So I've showed you last year and the season that's just finished now. And the red squares are where they failed, had a breeding attempt but failed, and the blue ones are pairs of owls that sit as a pair but never breed or haven't bred. So we can see that there's really a difference in that Pennant Hills and Blanco Valley are a big chunky patch of owls, but really not much happened up in the northern beaches, whereas last year all of these yellow territories suggest that lots of owls, we found more owls up this way for a start, and that they did really well at breeding last year. Newcastle was a bit weird. I think part of the situation in Newcastle is that there's just not enough people looking, and I don't have enough records for the area, but I'm up and down there all the time trying to find more people and trying to get people involved. So these historic records just show that the project doesn't know that owls were there for 5 or 6 years, but in fact it's not really anything, because we could have breeding for 30 years for this pair of owls that's out on that territory. So it might be that they will come back into these areas, we just don't actually know. We need to keep monitoring to see what happens. Southern Sydney is more interesting to us because here we are. Here's our Bundeena owls down here. This is Chris Lloyd's territories, Georgia River, and he had a lot of, he didn't have much breeding last year, and he had a lot of death of the owls that actually did fledge, and he felt that that was, he feels that there's a real difference in the size of the two sides of the river, and that one side's being turned into McMansions, and that we're losing a lot of foraging habitat, and that we just see owlets starving to death over that side of the river. On the other side, where there are older cottages from the 50s, the owls are still doing quite well. I don't know whether those numbers will hold up. We need to keep looking and see, but we had quite good breeding success really last year. So that trend happened throughout the range that we've been monitoring, and I wish I could tell you about down south, but as I said, we don't have the data yet, so we just have to keep trying to find it. Nerida and Joy and I up and down the creek lines. But I quickly did this just before we came to give you an idea of what it is that we're looking at here and what we know about the area. These yellow sightings are everything that's been reported this year. So we've got a little cluster of, that's my place, Bulli Thurul Woonona. There's probably 2 territories. I suspect this is the one we had a look for just beside Bulli Pass the other day, where we found some roosting spots, but no Mr. Paupalau, and there's a pair of owls calling from up there, so there is a territory somewhere. It's just really hard to find. And I think part of that, the difficulty is that the fact that the city is spread out in a long line like this, and so the owls also must be spread out in a long line, because they're not foraging in the forest where it's too hard to fly. They're foraging in the suburbs where it's easy to get dinner. So they'll be moving up and down the suburbs as well. But I suspect it's actually at the back of Woonona somewhere, and I'll go next week and have a look for it. Mount Kembla's got a pair of birds down here on the BHP site, which I haven't found, but I got a fantastic tip-off for just today. And then there's these spots. The white spot here is actually last year's, sighting from last year, and there are a couple here. There was one in Mary Street in the middle of town. There's one at the back of Bellambi Lagoon, but whether they're birds that are actually staying around, whether they're floaters that are moving through, or whether they will stay, I don't know until I get more records or we manage to actually find where they are. I just wanted to show you what the bigger picture looks like a little bit. Mount Kembla's down here. In terms of what's happening up north, there's a bit of a question mark. There's 2 reports from Helensburgh, but no pair, so it's probably just a male, although there's no reason that we shouldn't have a pair up there. We're right on the edge of the national park. Just whether there's enough urban environment to support it, and whether it's behaving like a forest owl or an urban owl, I really don't know. I need more data, so it's a matter of running around and finding it, hopefully fairly quickly before they go down into the hollow and I lose them. We asked the volunteers to actually have a look at what sorts of trees they were using to see whether that would give us a good handle on what we needed to ask land managers to conserve. And it's primarily Angophoras, which are the favoured tree. This is smooth-bucked apple. Plane trees, some dead trees, but not very many. Blackbucks, ironbucks and terps. Where they sit's very different to that, because they don't actually always sit, of course, where they like to roost, where they like to nest, but the most interesting thing I think is that it includes feral species like privet, which are actually a really good thing down by the creeklines for owls. And they're something that we need to advise land managers to actually try to retain, or at least retain in a mosaic, because if you had a massive swathe of privet and owls were there, they'd be using it. You take it out and you're actually compromising foraging habitat for those owls. I do a lot of work with pellets. Does anyone see these? Are they fantastic to you? They're fantastic to me. I think pellets are amazing. We can get so much information out of pellets. So for those of you that don't know, pellets are regurgitated parts of food that are not digestible or don't have nutritional value for owls. Obviously they have no teeth, so they can't chew, so they have to swallow chunks. And when they swallow chunks, they don't want to be digesting the bone, so they put it in their crop, and that could take 5 or 6 feeding events to make one pellet. So when you're pulling a pellet apart, it's not just, oh, it's possum. It could be 6 different things, and it's really exciting. It's like Christmas Day. So out come the pellets, and they're often found around where the owls are roosting. And I found a lovely one at Christmas time that was festive. It was full of Christmas beetle wing cases, because they eat a lot of insects around Christmas time, especially big beetles. So everywhere I was going, it was just like, like decorating for Christmas in vomit. So this dietary information lets us understand that they're eating almost up to their own weight in food every day, which is for a big male 2.2 kilos of possum, which is a lot. They're eating 250 to 300 individual prey items a year, each bird, which is, as I said, a great density of possums, particularly because it is primarily possums, ringtails, brushtails, flying foxes, birds, and of course we have to use pellets to find these things. If we compare our data for the urban powerful owl to Kavanagh's data for the owls in the forest, we find that forest owls like to eat more insects than city owls. They eat fairly similar amounts of birds. They eat a lot more ringtail possums in the forest and a lot more brushtail possums and bats in the urban environments than they do in the forest. This is the data from this season's work on pellets, which I'm only halfway through, and I'll be doing it next Wednesday. If anyone wants to come to the Discovery Centre and pull through vomit with me, please feel free. This data doesn't reflect some really interesting stuff, but it's actually shown that for the first time we're seeing a lot of rats come into the data of the urban powerful owl, which didn't actually appear for the last 5 or 6 years. And I think that's probably a reflection of the change in the mammal populations, because we've had a fantastic year for small mammal breeding, 3 years in a row, where we have these great explosions. They breed up over the cold spring, and then they explode as the summer happens. You probably notice rats running around your place a bit more, potentially in your roof if you're like me and you live in an old cottage. So rats are a big part of the diet that weren't there and have certainly got up in more recent times. The other thing that we did last season was have a look at where owls were using, which parts of the cityscape the owls were using by radio tracking owls. And this was an initiative with Lisa Harvey from the University of Sydney, with John Martin from the Botanic Gardens and Dita Hockula also at the uni. So they really wanted to look at whether home range changed depending on how urban the areas were that the owls were occurring in. And I've pulled some samples out of the data because, does anyone know how to catch powerful owl? You shoot a bow and arrow up into a tree, you pull your net up, you do a call playback on the ground, you drop the net over the owl when he flies in to investigate the speaker, and then you hope. So it's a very hit and miss process, and in fact it's really difficult to sample very nicely the whole population, because you're really getting the animals that want to come in and respond to that call playback that you're playing. And since we have stupid human ears and we don't actually know what that call is actually saying, it could be anything that we're broadcasting into the territory. So also they didn't have a great deal of understanding of biometrics, and so they didn't know which sex of birds they were radio tracking, and they were radio tracking in the breeding season when Mrs. Powerful Owl wants to sit on her eggs. So unfortunately the data is not great, but I guess what's interesting is that I've given you a male and female owl in the two that I'll talk about, because they show quite different things. So this is Mrs. Powerful Owl from Botanic Gardens. She's flying about 10 kilometres a day from the core part of her territory, which is the red part out the walkthroughs over here. And in fact, the most interesting thing about it is that these yellow hotspots where she's spending more time than she's in the green area correlate to the green spaces within the habitat. So she's hopping across parks inside the cityscape. But that's why when you live in a really urban area like the middle of the city, has to be large to get enough tea. So as I said, that's about 10 k's. When we go to a male owl at Balgowlah National Park, up on the other side of the harbour, I would have shown you the Menai owl, which was close to us, but really she just sat there. She literally went 200 metres and back. She didn't go anywhere because Mr. Pathlow was feeding her, so it wasn't very interesting. But this pattern's really typical of what owls do, both males and females, when they're not breeding. They hang out in the green patch. Here's a creekway where we've been running up and down, falling over logs, and they just sit in here in the daytime, and then they come and forage in the urban areas. And so I call it shopping for possums. You can find a jump-off point usually in the middle here, where they've sat and surveyed the territory, and there's a big pile of whitewash which tells you that they've been about. So you can see, because like many birds, they have to lighten the load before they fly, because poo's too heavy to cart around when you don't need it. So you have a poo and then you fly. You often see it when you're flushing a bird, when you're watching it. If you flush it and it wants to get away from you, it'll sit there and then poo at you and off it goes. So it's lightening the load. Owls do the same thing, and it's really nice to be able to find one of those jump-off points. Poo on it. It's so exciting. So shopping for possums is what they do, but this fly for this guy, when he lives in a fairly leafy area like Balgowlah, is really only 2 k's. But again, he's got a very focused core part of his territory that he likes best, and the parts that he's using in the cityscape are again these green patches like this. And I guess that really brings home the point that we need to be really careful of those park areas that are in our urban environments. They're not small parks that aren't much use for anything. They can actually be really, really useful parts of habitat for animals, and we just need to try to conserve them and be aware that, as much as we don't think they represent much on the landscape scale, they can be incredibly important. So how is it that you can help? I guess this is the best way that we can help powerful owls, is by actually talking about them, by learning more about them, by sharing our knowledge about them and our information about them. And that's really what I try to do when we do these talks, is that I'd love us to be able to just have a conversation, not me here going yeah, 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 but all of us to have a talk about what we know. And of course, if you hear owls, I'd love to know about it at powerfulowl@birdlife.org.au, and then I can put them on the map and we can try and find out where they are and hopefully move on to finding some territories and breeding further if possible. I wanted to talk about what it is you would spot if you're out and about and looking for owls. We didn't find much of this. When we were walking, we found roosting spots and poo and twisted ankles. But in Helensburgh, a lady's just sent me photos of our kill, which are really typical. I didn't do the gory photos, which for me I think are quite interesting. Powerful are carnivorous. They don't eat any of the vegetation that their herbivorous prey eat. So they actually do a beautiful incision right down the middle of the belly and snip everything out. And then they take the stomach and intestines and drop it. And I find that fantastic, because it's like an arrow when they drop it in flight, so it points to me that the owl flew that way, because I can see which way the entrails are laying. So I didn't show you the gross bits, but I showed you something else which is probably gross for some, but not as gross. What's this guy? Pretty typical plumage. Which one? Frogmouth. That's a frogmouth. And it's different to a goshawk kill, because a goshawk plucks so beautifully when it's, feather by feather. It's like confetti. Oh, no, it's permanent, off it goes. Whereas a powerful just goes, yeah, and pulls everything out in clumps. So you get all of these, the primary feathers and the body feathers in clumps like this, which is really typical of an arrowhead. The other thing that we'll look for when we're looking for owls is poo. Poo, my favourite thing, apart from vomit. Powerful owl poo looks like, they call it whitewash because we're trying to be polite. So whitewash looks like someone has spilled paint or yogurt on the bushes, and it's not small spots of feces but a big spray. Depending on how high up the bird is at will depend on how big the spray is, and it won't just be on the ground, it'll be all up. If it's a nice roost side, it might be down the tree trunks or all over the foliage. And this is quite persistent. Even after rain, it will stay there. And so even if you're looking for the tree that you think that they might have used for nesting, 2 months later you can come along and actually find wash and get a good idea of where it is, which is how we can find one of the trees in Bunneena, where I hope they'll breed again this year. And often amongst the wash there are delightful pellets, my favourite bits of vomit, there they are. And they often look like They can be quite large, small, doesn't, depending on the owl that made them will depend, but they're generally about that big and bigger. And some people describe them as looking like they've come out of a vacuum cleaner, sort of hairy, dusty bits of stuff. And they'll have these lovely fragments of bone. So there are of course, the other owls make pellets as well, but those pellets will be full of insects and insect parts and wing cases, whereas powerful owl pellets will always have bones in them, or sometimes they're mainly just hair and keratinized bits of feather, but often chunks of bone. And I must say, even though you find powerful owl carcasses often beheaded, the head must be delicious because we find jawbones constantly, and the jawbones and forearms are the biggest standard of what's inside the pellet, so they must be the parts that are actually really easy to eat or to swallow whole because they're the things that come out a lot. So, but when we find them clutching prey, it's often without a head, and if you might find a carcass with no head, it's quite typical that it's a powerful owl kill, although it won't be sheared bones as if a fox or a dog has gotten into it. I talk about adopting a hollow because much as we'd love to have powerful owl hanging around, many people don't like them at all because they just don't like the goriness of the bits and pieces that are left behind. Some of them find the hooting very annoying, and there's quite a few people that keep saying I've been trying to throw my boot at it because it's sat on my roof and it's hooting away. So we need to be aware that we're working in a space that's shared. It's a human space and an animal space, particularly in the urban environment. So we need to try to make that work for everybody. If that means, being respectful of the sorts of trees that humans like to use, then that's what we should do. But we should champion the fact that hollows are important for all sorts of animals and for powerful owls, particularly those old big hollows that we want to retain. And the other thing is that we should plant habitat. So often we're not going to have 150 years to wait around for a hollow to grow that big. I hope that I'm not here in 150 years when a hollow might be big enough for an owl, but I certainly know that I can make foraging habitat for owls now by actually creating shrubbery and dense foliage in the gardens, which we know does wonders for climate change. We know that it brings our small birds back into the garden. We know that it encourages diverse life on the ground, so planting for habitat is a fantastic thing for the world, not just for powerful owl, not just for humans, but for our whole diverse ecosystem, and that's something we should all aim to be doing. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
I've got one.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier on about some of the reasons for mortality of the powerful owls.
Yeah.
One of them was baiting of rats.
Yes.
I was a bit surprised because I thought they only take live prey. So
Every animal in Australia has eaten carrion at some stage. All animals, vegetarians eat carrion. We know that lorikeets love to chew on a bit of carcass, and particularly when things are compromised by whatever the process is that's going on in the environment, they will take carrion as easy prey. Snakes, which we think only eat live food, love to eat carrion. Possums sometimes eat carrion off the road as well. But, the most telling example of carrion eating where we know it happens in powerful owls, there's an owl flying around Oyster Bay at the moment it's got an ulceration process going on in the eye. You can see that that's opaque through the pupil on one side. And there's in the last photo that I saw of him, a huge blood spot inside his eye where he obviously bashed into something because he couldn't see out of that eye. And so we've actually seen him feeding on carrion down on the road too because he doesn't have the capacity to hunt. His binocular vision's compromised because he's not seeing out of that eye, and he has to take carrion to survive. So whether he's around or not, I don't know. Whether he probably won't last that long. But carrion's a really easy source of protein, and it's taken by all animals in Australia.
So if it's been a rat, poison,
Yeah.
it will kill the bird as well.
Well, it kills birds of all ilk, not just powerful owl. So secondary poisoning is a disgusting process. If you're using poisons in your house, please ask your pest controller to check what sort of poison he's using. We have the opportunity to actually be very choosy and to say what we want and don't want now. So stay away from warfarin. And the reason that pellets are really useful too is that we can look at poisoning through those processes as well. So a pellet's great because it tells us what powerful owls have been eating, but it's great also because it lets us look at the health of the prey population, not just what's around, but how many of them there are, what sort of age structure there are, whether there's disease processes, and we can do heavy metal testing on those bones as well, so it lets us know if we're finding clusters of owl death. We can analyse those pellets and have a look at whether there's some correspondence between what's being eaten and why they're dying, and that's certainly the case up at Narrabeen Lagoon at the moment. So there's been a cluster of deaths that happened last year, and I'll be running around there tomorrow actually trying to find pellets to see whether we can do some analysis on those, because, you know, it's hard to get resources for something that flies and moves and is, you know, really shy of being caught and incredibly hard to catch anyway, so we have to use those secondary things to actually understand what's going on.
So there are things that you can use for poison rats at the moment?
Yes, you can use Ditron. So you just need to ask your pest control. Before we had rat poisons that animals would eat, rats would eat, and they would make them bleed to death slowly, because they were little shardy things that interrupted the membranes inside their bodies, and then all the fluid started leaking out into everywhere and you get bleeding and then they die. Whereas now the poisons that we use actually make the animals really thirsty, so it makes them leave your roof or wherever it is, and they go out to have a drink, and then their cells just lies, they just explode. So it's actually, and there's no, once they've touched water and that process has happened, the crystals don't shrink down again, and so you get water again and they explode again. So if anything ate that animal that had been exposed to Ditron, there would be no transfer, there'd be nothing that would cause harm. So it's really worth being aware of what we're actually using in our houses, and we had a situation where the Tawnies were exposed to secondary poisoning in Wollongong 3 or 4 years ago, and that was through termiticides, I think. So it definitely happens, and it's worth keeping an eye on. Yeah.
Question? Anyone else got any questions?
Well, ask me questions, I'm friendly.
Question? Oh, so question.
Yeah.
Collecting the carcasses of any dead owls, for example.
Yes, that's tomorrow's trip as well. It's dead things and puke tomorrow. So yeah, I do, and every time I go around, I've been doing a whole heap of looking at augmenting habitat, or that's what I'm starting to do, because I think the project's been great and going along well. Here's owls. Owls are great, but we really have the scope to be able to do more. We should be doing more, because it's nice to be able to go, here's owls and they're great, but it doesn't do anything in terms of what we can do to keep owls around. So I'm looking at trying to understand what makes a good nest tree and whether we can replicate that and put it into those habitats where we know owls exist but they don't breed. So yeah, as a part of that, I go around and measure a whole bit veg, collect all that information, and hopefully have an answer. Haven't got one yet, but I'm on the way there. Yeah.
Are you going to be able to do any work in the catchment area when it's going?
Who knows? Theoretically, I should be able to, but they can keep you out by just saying, well, it's too dangerous and there's going to be a fire and you can't go there. Probably I'll be able to get in if I have good evidence that the owls are there. There should be no reason they should stop me. The thing about it is that for most powerful owls, they're actually using territory and breeding within 100 metres of the urban border, the urban boundary. So that means it's not necessarily catchment land, but all of that crown land, which is now coming under fire with the changes in the Vegetation Act. So we know that the purpose of all of that land will change dramatically, and it's about to be opened up to be used by a whole heap of different entities that didn't use it before, because it's now no longer protected. And that means that the owl habitats there are really at risk. So the more we find, the more easily we can then say to whoever the land managers are, look, here's a vulnerable / about to be endangered species. You need to be able to preserve the habitat, and in fact, because they have a very positive status in the minds of the general public, if the council goes, no, I don't care about that owl, people won't like it. So the more we talk about it and get people to understand owls, the more power we have to actually stop stuff that's going on. And a big part of what I do is writing submissions for all of the sorts of clearing events that are going on within the urban areas to try to slow them down or to mitigate them, or to actually complete them in a way that has as little impact as possible on the wildlife that are there.
Sort of a question with Terry then, Andrew. So, who wants to go first?
The owls, will they actually use nesting boxes, artificial? They have to be hollows.
Yeah, the thing is, they've only ever used one nesting box once, because there was nothing else in the environment at all. That was down in Melbourne, where there's no trees left. And we don't actually know why it is that they don't use nesting boxes, but for every configuration of nesting box we've ever tried, they haven't used it. So the idea now is for me to try to understand what it is we can do, because we know that there's enough food to support a pair of ours because they're already living there. We just don't know why it is they never ever breed. So I now have run around for the last 3 months collecting all of the data about what a good owl tree looks like, one that's a successful one. And the next step is to go to all these owls that aren't breeding and have a look there and go, why is it that you don't breed in your territory? Is it just because you don't have a hollow? Or is there something else that I can see in the territory? So that's what I'm currently doing at the moment. And we could potentially cut down slices of natural tree hollow and put them up in the environment, which is theoretically what we should be doing as a mitigation when we cut down tree holes. But ours may not like them because they don't like dead trees. And I suspect that's about microclimate within the nesting chamber, because they're winter breeders. Temperature is a really important thing. Live trees have bark, and bark buffers temperature. So without understanding more about the process of what goes on inside the hollow, we can't really know how to replicate it to get them to a box or a fiberglass tree trunk or whatever it is we put up to actually get them to use. So I need to understand that better, which is what I'm trying to do at the moment.
Photographs from the night shot here, I'm thinking, is that going to shine torches up there, or do you sort of have to put your camera on a tripod to the ASA right up?
Yeah,
Take a few seconds worth of it.
don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah, or if you're shining torches, then you can put a red filter over them, even if it's just a bit of red cellophane or blue, so they can't see that sort of light, and that's less disturbing for them. But this time is I think they're the most finicky about what goes on in the nesting, around the nesting tree. They're sometimes quite accepting of changes in the foraging habitat that isn't right inside that core part of the territory. But even something like a branch dropping off the tree that they usually nest in can be enough to go, right, no, I won't breed. And they're not like other birds where they might have a couple of goes, they might have an early season attempt, and if that fails, then they'll go again. Powerful owl do it once, and if it doesn't work for them, then they don't have another go. So if they're scared away from that tree hollow, which I know that some of the photographers have done up in Engadine, then they just lose their chance at breeding for that year. So yeah, it would be great to say you could approach them doing this, that or the other, but at the moment the only good photos are those taken at high ISO that don't use light. And one of the guys who does a lot of photography up north feels that photography in the day is okay because they're less likely to flush, but from my perspective, if my license says no flash photography, then it's just no flash photography for me. But then, as I said, volunteers will do what they want to do.
A couple of years ago, 2 years ago, I don't remember what it is, but 2 years ago we put out these leaflets for our club trying to find powerful owls in the area. We had a number of calls back from the general public.
Yes.
We've got a stack of them here.
Yes.
So if members want to go and letterbox drop them in their local area, please take some and do it, and we can contact you, Beth, and let
Yes.
you know the results of anything that we get.
That would be fantastic.
General public.
I would love you to do that.
We've got quite a
Yep.
number of these, so members, please take some,
And
letterbox them, and in your local area, I think that's my number, or something else number.
Shops or on notice boards
Yes.
Yeah.
somewhere too, if you
Yeah.
ask someone, give them like a shop.
I've got a similar thing like that, which just